Hi, and welcome to this chord theory lesson. Now in this tutorial I will try to explain the theory of extended chords, which are 7th chords that have an extra color or tension note in the form of one or more extra unique scale notes. Now don't worry, it will all be crystal clear soon, that I promise. So it is important, no, imperative, that you watch part 1 and part 2 first, because the explanation in this video is built upon that knowledge. So, let's begin. Important to know is that all extended chords are built on 7 chords. Now I'll do a quick recap of those 7th chords to categorize them for clarity's sake. Now these are the 4 main types of 7 chords. 7 chords with a major 3rd and a major 7th degree, and we call them major 7th chords. And they sound happy. The next type are 7th chords with a major 3rd and a minor 7th degree, and we call these dominant chords. They have some tension. Now the next type are 7th chords with a minor 3rd degree and a minor 7th degree. And we call these chords minor 7 chords. And these sound sad. Now the last type has also a minor 3rd degree and a minor 7th degree, but it has a diminished 5th. These are dissonant chords and we call them minor 7th flat 5 chords or half diminished chords. So we have 2 major chords, major 7 and dominant 7, and we have 2 minor chords, minor 7 and diminished 7. As I said, I'm going to explain extended chords based on these 7th chord structures. And again, you should watch part 1 and part 2 first for a thorough understanding of triads and 7th chords. Now, looking at the G major scale, we see 7 different notes that are numbered from 1 to 7. The numbers also identify the intervals, like the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th. For the next octave, we use the same numbering again, 1 to 7, and so on and so on. This numbering of chord tones helps us to define the structure of a chord. For instance, a 7th chord is the result of playing every other note of the scale, so note 1, 3, 5, and 7. In other words, the root, major 3rd, 5th, and 7th. At the same time, this is a stack of 3 3rd intervals. And that goes for almost every chord. Now this concept is also called tertian harmony as opposed to quartal harmony. And if you like, you can watch the video about that subject on my channel too. Now an extended 7th chord has yet another 3rd stacked on the existing 7th chord. And sometimes even 2 times or sometimes even 3 times a stacked 3rd. Now with these extra specific notes, the chord becomes either more colorful or it gets more tension, or both. Because that is the goal and essence of these extra notes. We can call those specific notes that occur when stacking 3rds upon the 7th chord extensions. To identify an extension, we must keep counting past 7 into the next octave. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Because we're stacking 3rds, we only use the notes 9, 11 and 13. The intervallic names are 9th, 11th and 13th, obviously. These are the chord extensions. Now that means that the note A, for instance, can be a 2nd or a 9th. Which one it is depends on what we do with it. If we're talking about the G sus2 chord built from the notes G, A and D, we have to designate the note A as 2nd. But putting the note A on top of the 7th chord as an extension, then we have to call it a 9th. Now in the second case, the name of the 7th chord has changed from plain G major 7 to G major 9. Now naming extended chords can be a bit confusing sometimes. First of all, we have to understand that extended chords are always built on 7 chords. And that implies that the 7th is always present. Because of this, the 7th is not present in the name of the extended chord. Only the extensions are present. So, not C major 7, 9, but C major 9. And not C minor 7, 9, but C minor 9. Because we know that the 7th is already present in an extended chord. Aside from this, if we want to name a non-7th chord, such as a triad, where a 9th note is added to the triad, then we call it an added chord, an added 9 chord in this case. Like C added 9, consisting of a root, a 3rd, a 5th and a 9th. If we keep on stacking 3rds on top of the 7th chord, we can also add an 11th and a 13th. A minor 7th with an 11th extension would be called a C minor 11, and a major 7 chord with the 13th extension would be called a C major 13 chord. And now comes the confusing part. A C major 7 chord with a 9th and 13th extension is also called a C major 13 chord. So the highest extension counts. In the C major 13 chord, the 9th and the 11th can be present, but it doesn't need to be. There are two exceptions for this confusing naming convention. Now, one occurs when the composer wants you to play specific extensions, like for instance the 9th and 13th. Then he could write C major 9 13. Another exception occurs when an extension is altered, so raised or lowered. Now then, the 7 is notated along with the altered extension, like C major 7 sharp 11 or C dominant 7 flat 9, instead of C major sharp 11 and C flat 9. Notice that the altered extension is placed after the unaltered extensions. So now the naming convention should be more clear. Now it's very important to understand that the guitar is technically limited in regards to the amount of notes you can fret on the neck. Therefore, in chord shapes for guitar, the 5th is often omitted because of its insignificance for the sound. A good example of this are the shell voicings. And watch my tutorial about this subject if shell voicings are new for you. Even the root can be omitted if the bass player takes care of that. One thing though, if the 5th is altered, raised or lowered, then the 5th is significant for the sound and should be included in the shape of the neck and the name of the chord. So here you see an overview of the importance and functions of the chord tones. The root established the tonality of the chord, the 3rd and 7th are important for the chord type and sometimes the harmonic function, and the extension is the color note or an extra tension note. Major 7 chords are built from a root, a major 3rd, a perfect 5th, a major 7th. We add the 9th, 11th and 13th. Now the first extension is the 9th. Adding this note to the major 7 chord creates a colorful major 9 chord containing the notes from the major 7 chord and the 9th extension, like you see in this figure. This chord is a typical tonic of the major scale and can also be used on the 4th degree of the major scale as a subdominant chord. Shapes for this chord are these. The next extension is a 3rd away from the 9th and is the 11th. This creates a major 11th chord. Now this extension doesn't sound very good, as you can hear in this shape. The reason for the unpleasant sound is that the 11th is the same note as the 4th and is considered to be a so-called void note because it clashes with the major 3rd. Therefore we'll use an alteration by sharpening the 11th. Now the chord becomes a major 7 sharp 11 chord and is a typical tonic of the Lydian scale, in which the 4th and thus the 11th is raised to a sharp 4 or sharp 11th. Pay attention to the naming convention here. The altered extension is placed behind the 7th chord indication. Here are some shapes for this major 7 sharp 11 chord. The sharp 11 is also the diminished 5th. Therefore, these sharp 11 chords can also be named as major 7 flat 5 chords. Still, major 7 sharp 11 is mostly used as the name for this chord, even if there is no 5th present. Now the last possible extension is the 13th. The chord is now called a major 13 chord. Although it's not in the name, both 9th and 11th extension could also be present in a major 13 chord. Also, this chord is a typical tonic of the major scale. When it contains the altered sharp 11, then it can be a tonic of the Lydian scale too, for instance C major 13 sharp 11. Dominant chords have tension and are mostly used to create some kind of 5-1 resolution to the tonic, for example G7 to C major 7. The category of dominant 7 extended chords has a vast variety of extensions and alterations. Besides unaltered dominant 9, dominant 11 and dominant 13 chords, we also have the variations of the altered dominant chords. Now we look at the non-altered dominant chords first. The first extension we can add to the dominant chord is the 9th. and this creates a dominant 9 chord. The 9th adds more tension and color to the sound. Now shapes for this chord look like this. Now we can stack another third on top of the dominant 9 chord to create a so-called dominant 11 chord. Just as we have seen with the major 11 chord, the 11th extension in this dominant 7 chord sounds unpleasant, like in this shape. Now the reason for this strange sound is that the 11th is the same as the 4th and clashes with the major 3rd. Therefore, when using the 11th, the 3rd is often omitted and this creates a suspended chord. A chord where the 3rd is omitted in favor of the 4th, in this case the 11th. And this sounds actually very good. Now another scenario is that the 11th is raised to a sharp 11. It still causes tension, but in a colorful and more pleasant way. This chord is the tonic of the so-called dominant Lydian scale and can also function as an interesting substitution for the common dominant 7 chord. And the shapes look like this. The last unaltered extension that we can add to the dominant 7 chord is the 13th. The name of the chord changes to dominant 13, in this case C dominant 13 or just C13. Especially with the other extensions, this chord sounds colorful, like in this shape where also the 9th has its place. The dominant 13 chord is a typical tonic of the Mixolydian scale, but it is also used as the dominant chord on the 5th degree in a major or minor scale. Shapes for the dominant 13 chord look like this. Altered dominant 7 chords are characterized by a raised or lowered 5th, also called an augmented or diminished 5th. Now these alterations of the 5th result in a great amount of tension that makes the resolution to the tonic even more satisfying. We've already seen altered dominant 7 chords in Chord Theory Part 2, by the way. Now we can make these altered chords even more spicy and unstable by adding an altered 9th extension, either raised or lowered. Now there are all kinds of combinations where only the 5th is diminished or augmented, only the 9th is flattened or sharpened, or both 5th and 9th are altered in any combo you like. The first group contains the altered chords where only the 9th is altered and the 5th is still an unaltered perfect 5th. They are the most common to use. Now we have two flavors, dominant 7 flat 9 and dominant 7 sharp 9. The flat 9 creates a dissonant minor second interval with the root and creates a dissonant tritone interval with the 5th. So plenty of instability here. The sharp 9 creates a dissonant minor second interval with the major 3rd and an augmented 5th with the 5th of the chord. The second group is built from a dominant 7 flat 5 chord plus an altered 9th extension, which can be the flat 9 or the sharp 9 as we have seen. Now this chord contains no less than 2 unstable tritone intervals and a minor second interval, so this is an uber dissonant chord. Now these chords are not very common and on the guitar they are often substituted for other chords. The last group is built upon a dominant 7 sharp 5 chord with an addition of the flat 9 or sharp 9. These are much more common and easier to fret and sound not as brutally dissonant as the flat 5 altered chords. The chords in this category are built upon minor 7 chords that consist of a root, a minor 3rd, a perfect 5th and a minor 7 degree. Common extensions for this 7th chord are the 9th, the 11th and 13th. The minor 9 chord is built from the notes of the minor 7 chord and the 9th D. I think the 9th is the most beautiful color tone in minor 7 chords. The minor 9 chord is a typical tonic of the minor scale and it can also be used on the 2nd and 6th degree of a major scale. Shapes for this chord look like this. If we stack another 3rd on top of the 9th chord, we'll end up with an 11th chord. Now, unlike the major 7 and dominant 7 chords, the minor 7 chord sounds great with the unaltered 11th extension. Logical, because the minor 3rd won't clash with that 11th. Shapes look like this. The usable 13th extension is in fact altered if we consider working in the minor scale, because this minor scale has a flattened 13th degree, and almost exclusively will use a natural 13th degree for the 13th extension in minor 7 chords. Other extensions like the 9th and the 11th can be added to your own taste. Now, most of the time extensions and minor chords are not altered because of their strange dissonant sound. Maybe used by film composers for an eerie effect, but besides that, they are very rare. In flamenco music, there is a suspended version of this minor 7 flat 9 chord, which is used to create a typical arabesque sound with a Phrygian tension. Using the root E, this is the E minor 7 sus4 flat 9 chord. The minor major 7 chord has one usable extension, and that is the 9th. The minor chord with the major 7th and the 9th is spelled as C, E flat, G, B and D. Now the chord is named as minor major 9 and is undeniably linked to the bond theme, where the root of the chord is E. The last category is that of the diminished chord. These chords are dissonant from itself and get more dissonant with added extensions. Maybe an extension can occur as a part of a melody on top of such a diminished chord rather than in the chord shape itself. Now if we would add an extension, let's say the 9th, then the chord would be called a C minor 9 flat 5 chord. And if we would add the flat 9, then it would be called a C minor flat 5 flat 9. Now the same goes for all the other extensions, of course. Extended chords do not limit themselves to 7th chords. Also, major and minor triads can have an extension. To distinguish the true extended chords that are built on 7th chords from the triads with an extension, we use a different naming convention. Now, when a triad is complemented with an extension, we call this an added chord, abbreviated with the suffix add. For instance, when the 9th is added as an extension to the C major chord, we call this a C add 9 chord or C added 9 chord. Commonly we only use the 9th and 11th as an extension for triads. The 13th is practically always notated as a 6th, and we call these chords 6 chords. Like a C minor chord that is enriched with a 6th, we call this a C minor 6 chord, and not a C minor added 13 or something like that. Now let's look at some shapes for these chords. Extensions that are added to a triad often create color more than tension. Now here's an overview of all the extended chords that were covered in this lesson. Now looking at the top right of the screen, we see extended chords based on major 7 chords. We have added the 9th, 11th and 13th. We discovered that the 11th should be altered to the sharp 11 to sound good. We'll ended up with major 9 and major 13 chords, both tonic of the major scale, and the major 7 sharp 11 chord, which is a typical tonic of the Lydian scale. Below we see the extended chords based on minor 7 chords, which are the minor 9th, the minor 11th and the minor 13 chord. Special attention to the 13th that is natural instead of flattened, what you would expect in a minor scale. Now we can add the 9th to the minor major 7 chord. That sounds best as an extension for this type of chord. At the bottom left we see the minor 7 flat 5 based extended chords. Although the extensions are played most of the time as part of the melody, we could add them in the chord. We can add the flat 9, the 11 and flat 13th. Top right of the screen we see the dominant extended chords like the dominant 9, dominant 11 and dominant 13. All very common in all kinds of styles. Moving on to the altered chords, we should know that the altered chords have either an altered 5th, altered 9th or both 5th and 9th altered. Besides the extended 7th chords, we also have extended triads in the form of added chords, as you can see in the left part of the screen. Now when dealing with triads, the 13th is always seen as a 6th, creating a major 6th and minor 6th chord. So this part 3 concludes the chord theory series. And with this you have a very good understanding of how chords are built and what the function is of each note in the chord. Now you have seen triads in part 1, 7 chords in part 2, and extended chords in this part 3. You can download the whole series in my ebook store, which is a package of 3 videos, 3 PDF ebooks, and all the supporting audio files all in one convenient downloadable course. So what's the next step then? Well, that's simple. Use them. Substitute triads and 7 chords in songs with extended chords and see what happens. Start with simple 2-5-1s and study chord progressions that use these extensions. So there's enough to elaborate. Now have fun, don't forget to subscribe for more, go to my Patreon page for more practice material. For now, bye!